asked our panel members to focus their presentations on our local watershed, the Englishman River, as a test case. Panelists are familiar with the watershed and its biophysical attributes and have the technical expertise to provide us with some insights in how they see the whole system approach working to reconnect hydrology and ecology in the Englishman watershed. So quickly, some gee-whiz facts about the watershed. The watershed's 324 square kilometers. Headwaters are Mount Arrowsmith at an elevation of 1817 meters. It drains east 35 kilometers to discharge in the Salish Sea by the city of Parksville. There are 5 species of Pacific salmon and 2 anadromous trout present and have access to half the watershed. There are 4 major tributaries. Over 87% of this watershed's lands are privately owned by Island Timberlands and Timber West. So, let's get into my presentation. Why did that move forward? Okay. This is a story about a local, first of all, I'm going to speak to the subject of a small stewardship group here in Vancouver, or here in this watershed. This is a story about how a local group of streamkeepers with a name that nobody can remember, but commonly referred to as MVIHES, have morphed from a focus of salmon and trout. Who put the timer on? I didn't put the timer on. Okay. Anyway, stewardship groups such as ours helping and to gather monitoring data to support effective aquatic restoration prescriptions that are often not located in streamside areas that can have positive impact for water and fish. MVIHES came into existence in 1998 with a mission of conservation and restoration of salmon habitat on the endangered Englishman River watershed. Over the years, our streamkeeper group was blessed to have a fearless leader in Faye Smith, seen here before her passing. Faye recognized that watershed restoration can only be successful if it involves community in a collaborative effort. I think it's important to highlight some of the significant conservation events that have happened over the past 20 to 30 years in this watershed that laid the groundwork for where we are today. Importance of strategic land purchases by the Nature Trust in 1981, starting in 1981, with the purchase of the estuary at $2.7 million, followed by the agreements to purchase 2 large blocks of riparian forest in the middle reaches of the river, have helped to secure 300 hectares of environmentally sensitive lands. In 2001, after the river was designated an endangered river by Outdoors River Council, an infusion of funding by the newly established Pacific Salmon Endowment Fund followed. I think it's important to note many of these early efforts to secure conservation were strongly supported by forest companies, along with Nature Trust and local government. So in 2001, with funding from the Pacific Salmon Endowment Fund, chaired by Rick Hansen, and also by Living Rivers Trust, managed by the BC Conservation Foundation, a total of about $1.3 million in projects to improve steelhead and coho rearing habitats were brought forward in the watershed. During the 12 active years of During 12 active years in the recovery plan, there were 50 reports completed and the results of many of the projects that were done. So, our society acted as the chair of the Watershed Recovery Roundtable, composed of agencies and landowners and local governments from 2002 to 2015, and helping to provide community support. We also informed the Oceanside community about habitat restoration activities through a newsletter called The English Patient. We also applied for funding towards, we also worked on streams such as Shelly Creek, some tributary streams, and we also applied a lot of training activities in our watershed, and who hasn't taken a streamkeeper course from Dave Clough? In 2013, members of the Watershed Roundtable decided to report out on how the river was responded to 12 years of restoration efforts. A further objective of the report was to provide an indicator of a healthy watershed so that volunteers could develop a long-term monitoring program. It was envisioned that monitoring by local stewards will serve the basis for future restoration activities for the stewardship community. As the author, Dave Clough, said, the community will care for and protect as much as possible its own watershed. Since starting in 2010, our volunteers embraced the idea of monitoring ecosystems and habitats in our watershed, oftentimes partnering with agencies, local governments, and private landowners on the status of certain indicators. We call the program Watershed Health and You. From water quality to fish habitat assessments, from flow monitoring to identifying fish in ditches, MVIHES has been involved in our watershed. Shelly Creek is a small tributary in the river flowing from the Arrington through Parksville and is an example of how local volunteers dedicated hundreds of hours in various monitoring projects, with each year being another data set on the watershed's health. Each data set, such as downstream smolt trapping, has been written up as a technical report available on our website. Our Shelly Creek data sets provide the foundation of materials used to write a water balance and sediment reduction plan for the creek. The report was completed in 2017, and we are actively promoting its content and conclusions to local government staff and politicians. However, MVIHES volunteers know that watershed health depends on you. So we are engaging our neighbors who live in the watershed to discuss how the community can help restore Shelly Creek. The legacy of Faye Smith and her mantra of engaging the community continues.